Hello, I'm Stuart Craner, co-founder of Thinkers 50 and director of the Business Ecosystem Alliance. Welcome to our first webinar of 2022. Every month, we will bring you interesting discussion, insights, research, and best practice from the world of business ecosystems. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to some great sessions in the months ahead. As always, please feel free to offer your questions, thoughts, and opinions during the session. And I am especially delighted that we're able to start 2022 with a session led by a great friend of Thinkers 50, someone whose work we have long admired. He is Navi Radjou. Navi is now a member of the Thinkers 50 ranking of the world's leading management thinkers. He's also the recipient of the Thinkers 50 Innovation Award. Navi's books include Frugal Innovation, Jugaad Innovation, and From Smart to Wise. All are required reading. Navi's latest work is a groundbreaking report on the B2B Sharing Revolution, published by Terra Nova. The report offers 10 proposals for government and provides a blueprint for moving from smart sharing to wise sharing. Once again, it is required reading and lives up to Navi's promise to uplift, catalyze, and connect. Navi has also brought along two great guests, so a practical and stimulating discussion is guaranteed. Navi will introduce them in a moment. So over to you, Navi. Many thanks once again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to join this LinkedIn Live event. And I'm so thrilled to discuss with you a very exciting concept, which is the B2B sharing concept. And as you know, in 2008, we had the Great Recession. And of course, things got really bad back then, but there was a silver lining, which is the emergence of the sharing economy pioneered by the likes of Airbnb and Uber. So likewise, during COVID, we saw the rise of another kind of sharing economy, this time led by businesses. And this is what I call the business-to-business sharing economy. And this is actually the subject of a report that I published late last year with Terra Nova called the B2B Sharing Revolution, in which I describe how during COVID, a phenomenon that actually began a few years ago, as our guest will show, actually gathered more momentum due to the economic and the health crisis as companies learned to share their resources, physical resources and intangible resources, as a way to achieve different benefits. It could be saving cost, increasing revenue, or gaining in agility and efficiency, or delivering better customer service and innovate faster and better. Whatever reasons could be, the B2B sharing is a new phenomenon that has been, in a way, in gestation for a couple of years, but really took off during the COVID period. So that's why I'm delighted to have today two esteemed guests with me. And I will have them each introduce themselves individually. Christophe Rebours, who is the founder and CEO of InProcess, and Lieke van Kerkhoven, co-founder of Flow2. So let us bring them on stage here, and I will ask Lieke first to introduce herself briefly, and Christophe to do the same.
Thank you, Navi, for having us here today on this LinkedIn webinar. And it's really exciting to share our practical experiences to support your report and your findings. I'm one of the founders of Flow2, as you already mentioned, and Flow2 is making sharing marketplaces for the business-to-business market. We make white label marketplaces mainly for companies to share internally, for networks or collaboratives, or for separate sectors. So you can think of healthcare, construction, retail. In every sector, there are particular assets that can be shared. And when I say assets, that can be goods, it can be services, it can be facilities, or even knowledge of people. So we kind of facilitate that sharing of all kinds of capacity between companies and organizations. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Lieke. It's a pleasure to share that with you, and thank you, Navi, to organize that with the Business Ecosystem Alliance. Thank you all. I'm a French designer, and a few years ago, I've decided with some human scientists to create an innovation program called Inome. That's the subject that we met our first relation with Navi, where we've decided to engage different type of companies around one common theme, which is the house, the housing design. And for that, we've bring together different companies like the Carrefour Group, like the Post Group of France, like Kingfisher Group, together to think about one common thing, which is the shared client. How all together we can think about what is the shared client and the future of his home. So that's today the elements I will share with pleasure with you and hope it will be helpful in your daily activity.
Thanks, Christophe. So maybe what we decided to do today is that rather than discussing about the theory and the concept of B2B sharing, we want to show you real-life examples of companies that actually are using B2B sharing. And Christophe actually hinted at one such initiative that we'll be describing in a few minutes. But I want to turn to Lieke now. And maybe, Lieke, if you can give us a concrete example of the B2B sharing initiative that you led, so people get an understanding of, first of all, how it works, but also maybe identify some of the benefits these companies are getting by sharing resources.
Yeah, sure. I think I'll share two examples because they are really different and I think very illustrative for what the point we're trying to make here. The first one is a platform we run in the Netherlands. It's called Pharmaswap. And it's aimed at a very specific professional group, pharmacists, because they have a lot of medication, expensive medication, that remains within their pharmacy, about to reach the expiration date, and then it has to be destroyed. So we were approached by a couple of pharmacists who said this was a complete waste of resources, especially since the production process of medication is one of the most ecologically harmful in the whole healthcare. It's, I think, in the top 3. So we created a platform for them. It's closed, so only pharmacists can access. And now they can exchange that medication. If it is approaching expiration date, they don't have a patient coming in that needs that medicine. Another pharmacist does, so they can exchange, and that medicine gets to go to a patient instead of being destroyed. Well, those advantages, I think, are pretty clear. First of all, they save a lot of costs, which is a very highly attractive for pharmacists because they care a lot about their money. So if they can have a bargain, then they will. Or they can sell something that otherwise would go in the bin. So for them, it's very advantageous. And like I said, the production process and also the waste handling of medication is very harmful. So it's a lot better for the environment if we can save.
And it's also, Lieke, it's also good for patients, right? Because there could be some hospitals that actually, as we saw during COVID, right, that desperately need such medicine, right?
Yeah.
So there's also a social impact. Yeah.
That's kind of an unintended side effect that we saw, especially in the early COVID crisis, that some medicines were short in certain hospitals or regions. So we could intervene and facilitate a transaction so that the patient care could go on, indeed. Yeah.
So before I turn to Christophe to discuss about his example, Lieke, I want you to clarify that in this particular instance, and we will discuss about that in the session, that there are different ways of doing B2B sharing, right? Configurations possible. One you gave today is what we call a private ecosystem, right? Where it's only members can join and they share in a very secure way the data, and it's not a public marketplace. But I want to clarify that Flow 2 also enables public marketplaces, right?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So that's like I said before, we work with sectors and well, the nature of the handling of medication requires that it's very private. But we also have, for example, a marketplace for the whole Dutch healthcare sector. So that's hospital, elderly care, disability care, basically everyone else except those pharmacists. And that's an open marketplace, although it is really targeted at healthcare. But they use it to exchange furniture, equipment, also capacity on facilities that you are not going to move, specific knowledge. And that is launched last May, also as a result of the crisis. And it has now been copied to Denmark, and we are going to another big European country, which I can't give the name of yet, unfortunately, but we are making the platform as we speak. So that's pretty excited. And well, since it's so copyable, very scalable. Yeah.
Lieke, thank you so much for sharing that. So I want to kind of try to summarize what Lieke said, because I'm going to try to show the comparison in a few seconds with what Christophe will be describing. So in the Lieke's example, as you can see, this is one particular sector, healthcare, right, that is trying to build either these private ecosystems or leverage the public marketplaces. And also the second distinguishing feature here is that the kind of resources being shared tend to be relatively physical in nature. It could be medicine, it could be equipment, it could be maybe even some healthcare services or space, for example. And then with Christophe, we want to transition to discuss about another way to practice B2B sharing, which is in a more cross-sectoral way, where different companies from different sectors can come together to co-create solution for their shared client. So in this case, what is being shared is not a tangible resource, but also intangible resource, which is clients. So Christophe, could you please share with us some initiatives you led that are focused on bringing companies from different sectors together and share the clients?
Yeah, with pleasure. At the origin, to tell you the story, the idea was to say, okay, how could we imagine the future of home with a human science approach? That means to understand anthropologically how we evolve in terms of domestic life around the world, and for sure, as a consultant, designer consultant, working with big companies doing innovation, the idea was to say we need to find a new entry point, which is the what I said before, the shared client. That means, as a client, I'm interacting every day with different companies. I'm interacting with a retailer. In that case, it was Carrefour. I'm interacting with for data with Orange, for example. I'm interacting with a set group with big brands like Roventa for my domestic appliances and so on and so on. So the idea was to say, take the entry point as the end user to understand the evolution of my domestic life. Then consider that around this end user, we have different fields of interaction which are composing what is house and what could be house tomorrow. And then find companies like Carrefour for retail, like Orange, like La Poste, that are representing these fields of interaction. And they loved that idea, so it was a test. And we had the chance to work 6 months with those group of companies, in fact, who had been selected by the end user, and all together, it's a way to imagine the future with not saying I'm the only one, like, for example, Kingfisher with the B&Q brand, for example, working on the future of home, but I'm part of an ecosystem surrounding the end user, and I can then imagine a new type of innovation because I'm sharing it directly.
So Christophe, just to clarify in this particular case, because people might be saying like, this idea of partnership has been going on for a while. I think you explained it, but maybe make it very explicit that here we are not talking about targeting an existing market, right? This is a blue ocean strategy where you're envisioning, right, a future market. And can you elaborate on that? Because in a way, I suspect that that's what incentivizes these companies, right, who are in a way competing sometimes. can you explain what dynamics are in play to convince these companies in the first place, right, to come and join forces?
Exactly. Sure. When you do innovation, if you are, for example, a bank or a retailer, and you try to imagine what could be your future and the future of services you can imagine for your clients, you have your own channel to do it. Then you will create some clever things, but there are only a part of ways to do it. Since you decide to share your way to do innovation, you would say, for example, I am a bank. To interact with my bank, I need a smartphone. Then I interact with an operator. Then it's better to see what you can create as a bank with an operator to create a key moment of interaction, which is then better for the end user since you do it through the eyes of the end user. So if you aggregate things like that, at the end, you come out with innovation that are not seen through your vision, but are seen through the vision of an ecosystem of interactors. Since as an end user, I'm not only interacting with a retailer, I'm interacting with a retailer through the smartphone, for example. So it's better to imagine an innovation that aggregates some different issues. And it's a way to make I know, Navi, you're the specialist of that, some jugad innovation, because the time of the end user is like antenna time. I mean, you have some key moments, and you will be more smart in these key moments. That means you will not add many type of interaction with the bank, the operator, then the retailer, and so on and so on. You will start to aggregate things together for a common solution, which is more smarter, more efficient, more elegant, which will be more impactful, in fact, in my daily life as an end user, because it has been created through my time sheet, finally, instead of more a group and a series of interaction that are standalone. So it's a new generation of innovation created by the aggregation of solutions built together with different players around the end user.
And I think before Lieke, I want to ask you a question that Nicolas Dewar has sent us by comments. But before I go there, I want to also the audience to know that what Christophe said is that, this is important to serve customers who are looking for seamless experiences and end-to-end solutions, whether it's in mobility or healthcare, just to pick two domains. But there's also a financial reason to do this, because according to McKinsey and Company, by 2025, $60 trillion are going to be sifting through these cross-sectoral ecosystems that Christophe talked about. Because McKinsey predicts that by 2025, the sectorial boundaries will disappear because customers are going to look for end-to-end solutions as opposed to point solutions. So that also is going to compel companies to shed their sectorial kind of blinkers and learn to collaborate with companies from other sectors. Lieke, the question that Nicolas has asked is, what's your definition of platform or marketplace versus ecosystem? I think you may be best positioned to answer that, in the sense that because you actually offer a platform, right? But the question is, the platform can be quote unquote private label, right? And make it a company-specific ecosystem, an industry-specific ecosystem, or it could be an open marketplace. So maybe can you explain the differences between marketplace versus ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. I would just have one small remark on the previous things you said on sectors. Because yes, we do make sector-specific marketplaces, but that's mainly because the markets are not ready yet to lose their own boundaries. It is our vision that in the end, everyone will share between themselves, because a forklift is a forklift, whether it comes from a construction company or a facility group. So But marketing-wise, for now, we have to stick with the sectors because otherwise no one will feel addressed by any of our communication. And I think that's also dealing with Nicholas's question. So yes, we make platforms. Like I said, we do that since 2012, and in the beginning, you have to imagine that circular economy was very young and Airbnb was still something for the early beginners. So we were ourselves a sharing platform. Flow2 was a platform that you could go to and advertise your supply or demand. And we thought by putting that into the market, then everyone would start sharing because that's simply a smart thing to do, right? So that didn't happen. Everyone said it's a great idea, but nobody was really doing it. So we really had to reinvent ourselves, really look critically at what we were doing exactly. And that is when we started creating the white labels and the closed marketplaces for specific sectors or groups of professionals or collaboratives. And we are very aware right now that we make platforms. That is our product. But what we actually sell is a behavioral change. It's a change in mindset, because sharing is much more about what happens in here rather than the technical aspect of it. And I actually say very often to the people we work with, I think the circular economy as a whole is a rational framework for spiritual development, because yes, we need those rational frameworks to, well, kind of, because we still want to measure things and catalog things, but it's about the entire ecosystem. So everything that is influenced by what you do, and I think that is the ecosystem that you are dealing with. It's all the employees, their suppliers, your clients. That's everything in the ecosystem. And the platform is just the technical.
Yeah, Lieke, on that note, you talk about the spiritual revolution, or let's say, looking at something bigger than yourself, if I were to interpret spirituality, right? So one thing I found, as I wrote in the French edition of my report, but also in the English edition, is that one of the benefits of building these ecosystems is that it's to also leverage resources available locally, right, in the region. So in other words, this is called the economy of proximity, right? Because we have this kind of hyper-globalized economy that we saw clearly got crippled, right, during COVID. So are you also encouraging this possibility to source locally or regionally with these ecosystems?
Yes. So sharing is a global development, but it's actually a very local activity, because you're not, for most goods and services, you're not going to ship them on a long distance, except when it's very specialized. So what we usually make is a bigger platform, but with the opportunity to have smaller sub-communities for regions or other kinds of groups that feel more strongly connected. So, for example, we work with several cities and municipalities to create their own sharing platform for all the companies in their boundaries. And that is as a result of the COVID crisis, because they want to stimulate local collaborations between their businesses. So that is part of the reshoring initiatives that have also come from the COVID, and also to build back more sustainable the economy.
Okay. Thanks, Lieke. Christophe, I'm also reading some of the questions that are coming in. I think one of the questions is actually from a LinkedIn user who's unidentified, but it's about how do you identify if the B2B sharing revolution is suited for a given industry? I love this question because it reminds my old days as a Forrester analyst. So it's called the maturity model, right? So where you can actually find out using different criteria which industry is most likely to adopt B2B sharing first. So from your standpoint, why did you pick home? I mean, and also the question talks about industry. Is it about industry? Is it about looking at what are the needs of the customers of the future, right? And then based on that, you can prioritize and identify which sectors have to come together, right, to create an end-to-end solution.
That's, you're right. It's an interesting question. For sure, if your entry point is the company, you will find many attributes that will tell you if the company is willing to share or not. But I think that's interesting from my experience to see that each time when you take the end user as the entry point and to consider that you will think about the future of his home, then it places every actor at the same position. And it helps to change the mindset of the company to say, you're right. I mean, if I need to invent something where, for example, I'm Group Seb and doing home appliances, even if previously I didn't work like that, when I look at my challenge to see how I will create some home appliances where I'm playing with electrical suppliers to save electricity and even things that help me to better use the energy of my equipment. It's a new way to say, it's a new field of innovation where I forget a bit about my previous way to do innovation and so on. So I think finally that if you take the entry point as from the user and the subject you are working on around the user, then it helps to open everybody in a new way to do innovation.
Thanks, Christophe. Lieke, I think there's also a question about trust in general, because one of the things that these marketplaces or these platforms do is they try to qualify who is going to join them, right? Because there's a sense of safety and trust built in. How do you go about actually inducing that trust in these transactions happening within your platform?
Yeah, so that's on various levels. One of the things starts with making white labels, because we usually work with a partner that already has a trust relationship with the potential users. So in the case of the healthcare platform, we work with the biggest Dutch procurement organization. The healthcare organizations are a member to them. They take several services from them. And if they come with a marketplace, then it's already a more trusted vehicle for them to do business with. So that's one of the things. Or use a very closed environment like with the pharmacist. So you always know that they are verified professionals of a certain level. So you know that they are selling goods that have been stored under the proper conditions, because everyone is under the same rules and legislation. Then in the product itself, of course, the users can add a lot of information, pictures, certificates, depending on the kind of goods that are exchanged. We work, of course, with a review system. We can also work in some cases with independent third parties that can do inspections or servicing. So if you are about to buy or rent something very expensive, that you can have an independent report on if the goods are as they are advertised. Same goes when goods have exchanged and they come back to do, for example, a calibration or an on-site inspection. And then we also try to work with preferred logistics partners to also facilitate the transport in a safe and appropriate manner if it's dealing with goods that require that. But trust is
there is there a feedback mechanism from the user continuous, like on Amazon or something, where they actually rate or offer feedback?
Yeah, if you've closed a deal, we ask you to rate the other user and the goods that you have gotten from them.
So I think there are also some comments coming up about the fact that essentially the way I interpret it is essentially we need to, I think Christophe, this is basically design thinking idea, is that we need to focus on, identifying, what kind of issues we are trying to solve, what are the major challenges, we are trying to solve, and then think about building this ecosystem as opposed to, create the ecosystem and then, try to solve that. Now, I would slightly challenge that comment and turn that into a question for you, which is the following, right? And I think that's why Lieke's last answer is important. Isn't that a kind of chicken egg when it comes to trust? Because some companies may not want to do this exercise of design thinking, right? Focus on a big problem and then think about building an ecosystem. They may go for the low-hanging fruits first, right? And it could be like something very tactical, e-marketplace where they, get to rent an equipment or something like that. And as they get more confident they might go to a higher level of cooperation, like the one that Christophe you talked about. So the question I have for you both is, how can companies, the user companies, learn to crawl and walk before the run in B2B sharing? Would you say that they should first deal with some small problems first they can solve with B2B sharing, get more confidence, then go for the bigger challenges? Or would you recommend that they go for a bigger challenge, but then they execute in small steps? Who, maybe Christophe, you want?
Yeah, definitely the first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so start with the low-hanging fruit, because then the risk is low. And they get to have positive experience, possibly take out the minor problems or hurdles, and then proceed to the bigger opportunities. Yeah, if you start too big, because you cannot. For us, if you use a business-to-business sharing marketplace like we make, you cannot start too small or too careful, because you need your dynamic in your platform. If it's too specific or too controlled, you will not have enough content to actually get dynamics in your platform. So we always say, then start with furniture, because there's no real harm there, and just get used to it and see how it works and how it advantages you, and then move on to the bigger things.
Good. Christophe, what's your take on that?
Yeah, for sure. From my experience, it was always like that. I mean, you're right. I mean, such company, they are not trained to trust competitors, and so the only way we've tried is to make them into experience of doing that. And for sure, since they do that, they understand that they will not lose something, but gain something, win something. And it's a very interesting economy, because normally you can imagine as a user, I have a sort of timetable of key moment of interaction, and all companies will try to get to be the first to reach this key moment of interactions. And those companies, when they try to work like that, they understand that the challenge is not to add some new key moments, but to work together on the same key moment. So it's by itself a clear economy, and the clear value of this economy, and it's the key moments who make confident each company to say, okay, I will change my mindset, and because I understand that it's not a question of trust, it's a question of efficiency, in fact, and cleverness of the way to work like that, instead of adding more and more key moments that at the end are less efficient.
And I think one example I can give as well, leveraging what people have explained, is the fact that I've also seen some interesting best practice. I mean, I'm old enough that you remember back in the late 90s, we talked about e-marketplaces, exchanges with players like Ariba and Commerce One, who in 2000 had a market cap bigger than GM. So what happened is that I see the same dynamics now, where some companies are saying, we will do that first within the four walls, within our organization first, this kind of sharing across business units, for example, or with the example that that Lieke explained, within a particular region or something like that, and then open it up, right? That's another way also to have a better control over the dynamics of B2B sharing. And also it's something they know better as an industry or a company. And then gradually, they enlarge the circle of participants in these, marketplaces or ecosystems. So I have another question about, and I want to make sure that I have enough diversity of questions in terms of who ask. There's another question that was asked a few minutes ago, and I thought that's also an important one by Yusuf Chotia, which is about this idea that when you build these ecosystems, generally there are some small players and big players, right? The Davids and Goliaths. And there's always this challenge that the Goliaths, will crush or buy out these Davids, right? And how do you make sure that there is, a kind of a clear peer-to-peer, equal level of, partnership in these ecosystems? And here, Christophe, I remember you explained that in these ecosystems you're building, actually there are no Davids and Goliaths. There are just many Goliaths coming together. But then I will challenge you, what if tomorrow these Goliaths realize that they don't have all the answers? They need to team up with, startups and small companies. Is there a danger that, these small companies get bought out by these big, giants?
Yes, for sure. And we made some try with this difference of balance. We're introducing some small key players which are advanced in some areas. And it's our role as moderator, and that's where design is useful, to always remind that, it's the end user who will be the masterpiece, and will say, I need that, I will aggregate that, and it creates a role and a level of action for everybody. Then it helps small companies to have a real role in this game.
Lieke, what about you in the case that, because often you connect, let's say, big hospitals with the small providers, for example, and you always learn about these kind of big guys actually squeezing the smaller suppliers. And how do you ensure that essentially there is a fair exchange of value between these large organizations and the smaller players?
Yeah, with us, I think it's a little bit different, because indeed we allow organizations and companies to share basically all their capacity that they have for their core business, except that core business. So they're not sharing core business, it's just all the goods and services and facilities that they have to do that. So the incentive for smaller companies and organizations to join a platform is different from that of the bigger ones. The bigger ones will more likely have idle capacity or more advanced equipment that they would want to share. And the smaller ones will be looking for that equipment because they don't have the budget or the need to have that for themselves, but occasionally they might need it. So I've never experienced in one of our platforms that the bigger ones are pushing out the smaller ones. It's actually bringing them together. For example, in the COVID crisis, we had this huge shortage of protective items like everyone had. And we had a centralized governmental body that was dividing it. But what happened there is that all the hospitals were first, and then the elderly care and the disability care and the smaller healthcare organizations. So they really felt left out. It's actually one of the reasons that they joined this platform, because they wanted to sit on the table and they wanted to have their equal share. And also the hospitals, because they felt a little bad because they did not have control, but they ended up with overstocking. So they wanted to help the other organizations, but they couldn't. So I think it's actually bringing together the Davids and the Goliaths rather than making it more visible that they are bigger or different.
I have a question that was asked yesterday on LinkedIn, so I think the audience would be interested in this question too. The question was, what about privacy and data privacy, particularly like in the case of Christophe, right? You are trying to talk about client sharing and with new regulations around like GDPR and things like that. How do you ensure that the user's data is protected? And in the case of Lieke as well, right? You're talking about healthcare, so there could be like a patient privacy data as well, right? So how do you handle the privacy aspect of data?
Go ahead, Christophe.
It's a good question, and to be frank, it's still a subject with lawyers to create the framework where we manage well all these elements. Today, so since we have to follow strict regulation on that, it limits the capacity of innovation. But I'm sure tomorrow we'll create some new environment, lawyer environments in order to help ecosystem of companies working more confidently with this regulation. So in parallel of creating innovation like that, it creates new laws around that, and I'm quite confident with the fact that it will help to be more clean with data and to work it more smartly. In fact, so I see all the initiative around that legal aspect more and more clever and more efficient to help ecosystem of companies working together.
Yeah, we don't save any personal data, and we're not dealing with patient data. So it's just the professional account details of the employee that has the account. The only thing that might be of interest is that some public organizations are afraid to publicly share what they have standing idle or what they need. We actually had that in the past, a healthcare organization that advertised some idle capacity. Then some newspaper came along and said, well, if they have all this idle capacity, then they must have misspent their procurement budgets, which is public money. So they were shamed. Whereas they should be applauded because they actually try to, leverage it rather than have it sit in the basement. But that's why the most platforms are closed, and you can only access if you have an account, which is approved by us or the partner. Yeah.
Good. We have 3 minutes to before the end. I want to kind of cram in 3 questions so that the first is actually a clarification. So yes, privacy issues are important, but you may want to pay close attention to what's happening, at least in Europe, is the fact that the European Commission is actually encouraging companies to share more data. So they're investing massively in secure technologies, as Christophe said, to facilitate actually B2B data sharing. And according to the OECD, if private sector shares more data, like client data, but safely, or resource data, like Lieke is doing, they estimate that the European Union's GDP collectively can go up to 2.5%. So I think indeed that's why it might be interesting to see how legislators are going to weigh the pros and cons of sharing and recognize that if they safely provide an environment for data sharing, it could actually lead to more innovation and greater competitiveness for European economies. I have one question from Kayan, which I think would be interesting for both of you, because you are building ecosystems, but B2B sharing, but soon there's going to be competition, right? So what factors will determine which ecosystem will win? Another way to put it, like, what will be your differentiating factors in the case of Christophe, these in-home, why somebody will join in-home rather than another ecosystem, or why they would join Flow 2 instead of another marketplace?
Lieke, you want to?
Yeah, does he mean, I'm not sure if I get it, does he mean clients of Flow 2 and other companies like Flow 2, or if we make a sharing marketplace for, say, a city, but then we also have a marketplace for construction companies, but then the construction companies in the city would want to join both?
I think the question addresses both, right? Indeed, if I'm a mayor, right, there are 2 ecosystems in my city, right? Which one I will choose, right?
Yeah.
So we can start with that. Maybe you can address that first.
Yeah. So like I said, it is our vision that in the end, everyone will just share openly, disregardless of what sector or company or country you're from. But in the meantime, we have to deal with the status quo and the way people think. So we make our platforms modular, and we always say that to people in the beginning. So you want to start within your city, that is fine. But at some point, some of your users may want to join one of our other platforms as well. So on an account level, we can always hook up people to other platforms. And then they can decide also if they are advertising their excavator, for example, they can decide if they want to do that just in the group for other construction companies or just in their own city or both. So that's how we kind of anticipate on the growing ecosystems thing, make it future-proof. And then, well, if some platforms have an earning model that is intervening with that, we try to solve it as we go, because we cannot forethink all solutions for every problem we may encounter in the future.
And you're not trying to lock in the customers, right, into your ecosystem?
No,
That's
no.
right. Yeah, okay.
No.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Christophe, I think, sorry, we are coming to top of the hour. So maybe Christophe, maybe you can answer the other question, which I think is also very important, which is essentially, so the executives who come work in your ecosystem, like in home, right? Yeah. What kind of changes have to happen in the mindset or the culture and leadership in the organization to lead these ecosystems? Because managing ecosystems is very different than, managing a function or a company. So can you comment on the cultural change required to become good at dealing with ecosystems or managing them?
That's a good question, because we are still, from my experience, in the middle of the path for that, because it's quite interesting to observe how companies use the way to work in this ecosystem and the outcome of this ecosystem. So we have a spectrum of solutions today, with companies sharing everybody inside their own company, and some companies that are just keeping that in a small group of people, because for sure it challenges everything in the way to do things. So it depends of their way and their expectation in terms of how we do innovation tomorrow, and what is the role of R&D, and so on and so on. So it's a good question, and I would really recommend to observe and still continue to observe that, to see how company will behave with these.
Absolutely, it's an organic process. I agree. We are going to learn as we go. So we have to wrap up now. Thank you so much, Christophe and Lieke, for enlightening us with practical insights and examples of B2B sharing. There have been other questions, and I think probably we can all tackle them offline. But for now, I want to thank all of you for joining us today in this LinkedIn Live event on B2B sharing. Please take a look at my report as well. There will be a link provided to on the LinkedIn comments, as well as check out the websites of InProcess and Flow2, where there are many amazing case studies on sharing of different kinds of resources. And yes, let's hope that 2022 will be the beginning of B2B sharing revolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.